We're now moving into the lightning round session, and this is focused on how to shift values of Wairarapa Moana. So our next three speakers have the unenviable task of presenting 20 slides in 20 seconds, and we are going to move straight into that. And first up, we have Rawuri Smith, who we've all had the pleasure of hearing from this morning. He's the Environment Manager as well at the Kaiwhakahaere Taiao for Ngāti Kahungunu ki Wairarapa, and to talk about their story through the treaty. Kia ora rā.
Kia ora. I'm wanting to speak about our treaty story. Just over the last 2 months, we've taken a number of readings for our treaty redress. And our treaty redress is, people might not know that there are 3 deed settlements that are a part of Wairarapa. One of those is for Kahungunu, the iwi that I was a part of in terms of the treaty redress. Another was in terms of Rangitane, in terms of that I wasn't part of, but that's another redress. And then the third one is a shared one, where we're, one of the things that we were sharing and thinking about was Wairarapa Moana. That's a part of our shared redress. The Moana systems wider is a part of interest as well, with the return of a Castle Point block back to the government. And so other places that have been given back to the government are like Pukaha. And so they're really important places for us. One of the things that we want in our redress is to be kaitiaki. And so as like kaitiaki, we might look at things like co-management and co-governance in terms of how we might look after things like Wairarapa Moana. And so there's an old story of something called a Taiao, when Tāne removed the arms of our parents, Ranginui and Papatuanuku. He put in the place or posts, and the posts were to connect the earth, Mother Papatuanuku, or the environment, with the climate or the sky, Ranginui, and Taiao, looking at the balance between climate and the environment. So right now with climate change, hugely important subject about how do we get balance by putting carbon from the area back into the water, by and in some places maybe through seaweed and the different ways that that can take carbon, but into our soil so that it can hold water a lot longer. And so we want to be kaitiria that when we see a problem, we might apply a solution. The word tiri, so if we had 3 compound words there, kai tiriria now, kai is a person, tiri is like a planter, somebody who plants. Sometimes, and I recommend that you watch Moana Jackson's beautiful kōrero about the warrior race. Sometimes native or indigenous peoples are known as warriors, but in New Zealand, instead of once warriors, we would have spent more of our time gardening. So once we're gardeners, and in gardening, we're making the most of the streams and these waterways that come up in springs. We're so lucky in places. In one place called Millennium Reserve, we've got 11 springs coming up in that reserve. And so we're so lucky in Wairarapa that, yeah, once every 150 years, we get a significant earthquake like the biggest ever recorded in terms of 1855. And so that Atua kōrero was about Ruamoku and the unborn Atua that is a part of the Shaky Oz and a part of our area. In 1855, the biggest land movement happened there. And this is my German grandmother and myself as a boarding student. I took this photo because I wanted this photo taken because this is the first time I was taller than her. But it's a little bit about intergeneration kōrero. It's about how do each of us come together. And so we take some inspiration from our whānau and we listen to whānau and think about how they want to go forward. And we look in the past to think about how we go forward. You know, on the side there, you can see pictures of Maui and references to Maui. And so that marae was right near Masterton, quite a way from Wairarapa Moana, but that was the opportunity. We still want to tell the story of our tipuna and the story of our whenua and things like weaving and teko and a whole range of different opportunities. We want to return to what we were previously in terms of political leadership, where we had Te Paramata Māori here in Papua, and that we came together there to say, these are the solutions Māori have for different things. Now through co-governance, in terms of our lands, some of which are here on the banks of Wairarapa Moana, we've said in the first reading, and interestingly, a whole lot of political parties liked it when Māori were sharing co-governance, but I'm not too sure how they felt about giving co-governance back to us. And so we want to have a look at the richness of some of our shellfish, and here's one, a freshwater mussel that's able to clear our water really well. Can we use natural-based solutions in terms of improving our environment and our ecosystems? We were also once with fishes, and with the sea level rise and the warming of sea, what does this all mean in terms of the life of our sea and our moana, and thinking about Hine Moana, the one that controls our tides, and thinking about how if you come to New Zealand, to Wairarapa, you'll need a big pot for the boil up if that's your cabbage, but it will also need a big pot for our crayfish, because when we bring our crayfish inshore, we have to put a saddle on them so we can ride them in. And so then we go out to the paua with a rake, and we just pull a paua in without getting our feet wet, because that's how we roll in Wairarapa. And so part of it is about all of that weaving together. One of the things that we talked about in the treaty claim was that we're not just doing this for us, we're doing this for the whole of our province, everybody. So kia ora koutou. Post-treaty settlement era is coming to a station near you.
Kia ora rā. That's giving us lots of food for thought for the panel round that is going to be coming up shortly. I'd now like to introduce Ian Gunn. So Ian is, he worked at the Wellington Regional Council for 33 years as the Wairarapa Moana Wetlands Coordinator, and was involved in obtaining Ramsar status for the Wairarapa wetland area. Ian is passionate about the environment. He can often be found wandering around Kapiti beaches or the Wairarapa wetland, and he says Ian is surviving and thriving. So thank you, Ian, for being with us here today.
Kia ora, ko Ian toko ingoa, ko Ben Merdu toko awa, ko D toko. No, I got that around the wrong way. Ko Ben Merdu toko monga, ko D toko awa, ko Kote Manu toko iwi, ko Gunn toko hapu. I'm going to talk about, the first slide doesn't appear to be there, but anyway, I'm going to talk about Wairarapa Moana, Sea of Glistening Waters, New Zealand's Ramsar Jewel, a restoration challenge. In terms of the Ramsar criteria, you can see on the slide that it has native bush on the west, wetlands on the east, and in the far distance you'll see a yellow blob, which is the saline marshes. Wairarapa Moana achieves 8 of the 9 criteria, despite being one of the top 10 polluted lakes in New Zealand. It's a home to over 50 rare and threatened species. Examples here of down on the coast, Astrovestuca, which is a native fescue, and the mistletoe, which you find in the bush adjacent to the lake. For Farrar, I've also asked, where are the macrophytes? The journey to get Ramsar was long, and you can see there that it started back in the 1990s when Maggie Faringa, a local fish and bird forest and bird zealot, initiated it. The slide highlights those that are involved in the process, and I also highlight Ducks Unlimited, who had some unorthodox ways of restoration. Also, since 2000, following on in terms of the whakapapa, an application was prepared, disappeared into bureaucracy for 5 years. Cabinet has to sign it off, which they finally did, and it was granted in August 2020, number 2432, 10,547 hectares, only the 7th site in New Zealand. And this slide shows the magical turf beds on the lake shore. Since 2010, as some of the other speakers have said, there has been treaty settlements based around Wairarapa Moana, a cleanup fund, the ERI studies of Russ, Cawthron, the borlogs, which are really important, and we need to do more work on those, and more recently, Jobs for Nature. And Ra and I have worked with Worcester Polytech Institute students from Massachusetts over the last few years. And their job was, in their last study, Sarah Boynton, Brian Francis, Ryan Hawkins, and Noah Willie, their job was to see whether Mataranga Māori principles and Western science could be woven into the Ramsar characteristics. And what they found was, as some of you have already heard today, the whakapapa, the Māori belief that everything is connected and all things build upon each other. The overall health is only as good as the worst part of the lake, and health is holistic. So they found a connection between the Ramsar criteria and the specific goals of community health. And these are the 4 goals of community health that they developed, like large critical mass of birds with high diversity, or a region is able to support a healthy habitat for endemic fish. And you can see some of the exotic fish on the slide beside you. Out of that, they developed some cultural metrics. And one of the things they did was to look at Māori and divide it up into 4 elements: environment, economic, social, and cultural. And I'll just touch on those now. So in terms of the cultural Māori, they highlighted that factors that contribute to that is the feeling of loss diminished as the region returns to its historic state. They'd like to see the traditional fisheries return to scale, and really importantly, the cultural and historic value of the region be included in wider education. And here's a slide of what Wairarapa Moana was before the diversion in the 1960s and 80s. The green actually goes right to the coast, but you can see the scale. It's large and contributing both from the west and the eastern catchments. In terms of environmental Māori, they would like to see that Taiao species are no longer endangered, and the slide shows black-billed gulls being banded, that the wetland habitat is primarily populated by endemic species, that Lake Wairarapa is no longer supertrophic, and that the Ramsar classification is maintained. In terms of the taonga species, here's some perch and what comes out of their gut, inanga, and there is going to be, it's a challenge to see how the exotic species and the native species will be managed going forward. In terms of economic Māori, they'd like to see diversifying into less intensive agriculture, conservation consistently funded, and that Māori see a proportional benefit for conservation work. Interesting in terms of the social Māori, that the Ruamahanga is reintroduced, reintroduction gains support, that Mataranga is seen as a viable methodology, and that this Māori representation in regional government. Here's how the catchment looks today. You can see that it's very much smaller, and the area has been subject, as has been mentioned, in more recent times, the 1855 earthquake and the position of barrage gates at the tip of Lake Wairarapa. Out of all of this, out of about 30 elements, the students have identified quite a variety of elements to monitor going forward. So they would like to see that the exotic bird species aren't over-competing, as the same with the fish, and that there is a lack of personal connection to Wairarapa Moana now. They would like to see that monitored to see how that changes, and a lack of legal protection for endemic fish. So in terms of the restoration challenges, it's a big landscape. There are lots of interconnections. That means we need to be looking at ecosystem services, and that's where the bore logs of rust become very important. We want to see the water quality improve, and perhaps we also want to strengthen the coastal connection because of the importance of the link to the sea. What has Ramsar status done for Wairarapa Moana? It's rejuvenated it. We've got a lot more local interest. We've got regional interest, which Vanessa will touch on shortly. Nationally, we've got the Ramsar, we've got funding, and internationally, we've got students who are working and providing us with some surprises in their research. So restoring Wairarapa Moana is integral to the health of the Wairarapa, is a key finding from the students' case study. Nō reira, thank you. Oh, what do I do?
Kia ora, Ian. Oh, yeah, fantastic. Thank you so much for that. And we've got a few questions that are coming in around the Ramsar status. I'd just like to introduce our final member for the panel discussion, which is Thea DePetris. And Thea spent her childhood growing up in America, and Aotearoa New Zealand has been her home for the past 25 years. So thanks to Thea for joining us at late notice and also coming in from Taupō today. So with a background in teaching, Thea initiated education programs such as Taupō for Tomorrow and Kids Screening Taupō in partnership with iwi, DOC and the district councils. Thea's master's degree resulted in the creation of a collaborative community education model, and this framework is beginning to be used elsewhere and it now underpins the local moko moko education program in the Wairarapa as well. So presently, Thea is a PhD candidate at the University of Waikato, focusing on the network of environmental education organisations in Aotearoa, New Zealand. and their role in supporting early childhood kura and schools with nature-based education. So fostering nature connection through education is clearly an important part of her mahi. So tēnā koe, Thea, and welcome.
Oh, kia ora, Zoe. Tēnā koutou whānau. What a great introduction. Pretty much summed up what I'm going to talk about. But ko waio, ko lao te moanga, ko atarangi te moana, ko lenapi te iwi, no te whenua o lenapi hoki aho, kei topo aho e noho ana, ko Thea DePetris toku ingoa. Yep, so that's me, environmental educator by day and PhD candidate by night. And as Zoe said, my research focuses on the network of environmental education organizations around Aotearoa and their role to provide support for schools with regards to nature-based education. So today I'm going to do a quick overview of the theory behind nature connectedness, followed by a bit of kōrero in relation to how education can help shape or perhaps reshape our values, specifically with regards to nature connectedness and connectedness with place, and conclude with a mini case study. So let's get into it. Oops. As we've heard today, Indigenous worldviews and values are incredibly well known for holding a deep respect to nature and the belief of the interconnectedness of everything and everyone. Pretty famous and beautiful whakatoki here, which embodies this belief system. On the other side of the spectrum now is the Western worldview that'll prioritize human domination over nature and the use of the environment for the benefit of humans without any notion of reciprocity. As we're all aware, this has eventuated to develop a one-way extractive system of production and consumption and has greatly impacted the Māori of our Taiao and us. This recent UN report highlights the growing disconnect between humans and nature and the realization that the way forward to a more sustainable future depends on transforming humankind's relationship with nature. Nature connectedness is a relevant psychological construct with respect to this issue of disconnection. Nature connectedness refers to a person's relationship with and beliefs about nature. And research demonstrates the causal effects between nature connectedness and pro-environmental behavior. And it works, vice versa. The more we take care and take action for the environment, the more we're connected. So therefore, increasing nature connectedness is definitely part of the solution to the array of socio-ecological crises we face. But fostering nature connectedness isn't simply about being in nature or knowing nature. Instead, it also is about how we engage with nature. And there's a nature connectedness research group out of the UK, University of Derby, and they've identified these 5 effective or emotional pathways for increasing nature connectedness and hence changing people's relationship with nature. Improving our relationship with nature can help us move beyond our present day westernized norms and values. And so here I'm essentially talking about a cultural transformation away from exploitation and destruction as our primary underpinning purpose or silent purpose, but towards a new era when humanity exists in a genuine symbiotic relationship with all else on the planet. And I think Ross summed it up well this morning, when we prioritize and value all our ecosystems. And education most definitely plays a big role in this cultural transformation. So from here, I'm just going to speak on a little bit on my own personal experience through my research findings and also just general experiences as an environmental education educator. And I guess, yeah, it's my journey to help others understand the importance of education and that it is so much more about much more than just accumulation of knowledge. Here we've got over 300 environmental education organizations operating in Aotearoa that have identified themselves through my PhD research. And organizations like this are really well known for supporting early childhood in schools and kura and local communities with environmental sustainability education and connecting people to their place, their local place. A national survey I undertook as part of my study found that connecting learners to nature was the key outcome prioritized by the greatest number of these organizations. And as one of my participants offered, nature provides the perfect context for our tamariki to unfold and flourish. Their relationship with nature then becomes a part of who they are and how they see themselves and how they see the world and nature and how they treat the world and nature now and in the future. My research also explores how these organizations are connecting students with nature, and nature-based experiential learning opportunities are the foundation to these programs that prioritize nature connectedness. Some effective ways of teaching through these types of experience as shared by my participants include, engaging learners with the whenua through all their senses and taking action for the environment and learning through an Indigenous worldview. As Maturanga Māori and tikanga is based on respecting and nurturing the natural world and one another, this worldview and the kaupapa that goes with it was perceived as a key enabler to increasing nature connectedness. So doing things like learning through the purako of the landscape and integrating Maturanga concepts and aligning, our daily lessons with Maramataka. They're some of the methods that these organizations prioritize as part of their nature-based programs. We're really lucky in Aotearoa that our 3 national curricula are really non-prescriptive, and therefore there's plenty of scope to undertake this type of learning. However, there's still lots of barriers in this learning approach, and therefore the real life opportunities and assistance provided by these organizations that the assistance and the local opportunities for our young people and our communities to connect with their place. Environmental organizations play a pivotal part of helping our schools and kuras achieve that. And so in my last few slides, I'm just going to provide a small case study of Kids Greening Tupou. It's a conservation education program in my rohi that has successfully and continues to help schools integrate nature-based learning. I'm pretty familiar with the program. My master's was based on it, and I also spent 4 years working as the lead education educator. So Kids Greening Tupou is based on this model. We call it the collaborative community model. It's a model that aims to involve schools and the wider community in a real life project, providing opportunities to take action for positive change on an ongoing basis. And yeah, as Zoe said, I think you have local programs, Moko Moko and Tawa, I just heard, that are also based on this program. Kids Greening Tupou works with students and teachers and school management and everyone in the community, really, to connect learners to nature and integrate real life projects based on restoring our ecological corridors here in Tupou, and especially helping schools get that into their curricula. So it's not just something they do as for fun or on top of everything, but some, a key fundamental parts of their learning journeys. A wide range of programs too that we run with the community also helps involve everyone. So connecting to place and connecting to nature is the underpinning objective of Kids Greening. And we often use these quotes when we're talking to schools, and we just really try to highlight that need for tamariki and rangatahi to get off the devices and get outside the classroom and connect with the whenua. Aligning with some of the main points I discussed today, David Attenborough speaks of the need for experiences in nature, while Richard Louv goes deeper explaining that that knowing nature is so much more than a cognitive affair. And that's super important to my work, is that, you know, education is not just about knowledge, but it's about our feelings and our values and how we can shape those. And nature connectedness is a key component of that. And it arises when we can make space in our lives for connecting and building relationships with humans and the non-human species that make up our communities. And so just to finish off, a little plug for the New Zealand Association of Environmental Education, because there's a lot of momentum happening in this space. In short, the association's focused on empowering people of Aotearoa to be in sustainable relationships with the natural environment and each other and their place. Recent funding from the Ministry of Education has enabled the association to finally hire some staff and do a big strategic overhaul and revamp its website. The new website has just gone live, and if you're interested in education, go on to it. There's heaps of resources and professional learning developments and research, and also a national directory of environmental education organizations. And lastly, they're planning a conference in October, so keep an eye out for that if education is your thing. And that's me. Ngā mihi, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa.